actually wasn't. I mean, think about the timing here. We didn't close the books on the month of April till this morning. So, you know, that's one issue. Secondly, the filing season isn't done. Actually, I'm going to let Rich answer this because we have some good experience from last year that I think would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, I might say, I mean, as April progressed, I guess we began to see here some concerns looking at income tax revenues. But until you have the month totaled up, you really don't know how it's going to turn out. And a good illustration of that is what happened a year ago in April. And last April, we actually collected on the final 3 days of April over $600 million. If that had happened this April, I wouldn't be talking to you about an April shortfall. So you really need to have the final April results before you can really conclude what's happened in the month.
Director Sabety, you just said earlier that $3.5 billion of the $3.8 billion that hasn't been spent yet is pretty much already committed and is hard to cut. So, I mean, do we just conclude from that it's a virtual certainty that this will be, the short-term deficit will be solved by using the rainy day fund? Or is there something you haven't mentioned yet that's another alternative? Or is that pretty much it?
Well, I think clearly, you know, as I've indicated, you know, the size and the scope of the gap that we're looking at, you know, obviously is going to force us to consider using the rainy day fund, but that's an issue, you know, the bill, as you know, is before the Senate in its chamber for deliberation at this time, and so obviously this is something that's going to be up to the legislature and the executive branch to solve together.
Using the rainy day fund for fiscal 09, though, would require legislation separate from the budget that's before the Senate now, would it not?
I think that has certainly been the convention that's been followed in the past.
Would it be the convention followed this time too then?
I can't speak to what I think is going to happen in the future. We'll just have to continue our discussions with the legislature.
What about the furlough days for state workers? They're supposed to take so many by the end of the year. Would it help if you move that up to have them take that so many by the end of June?
I think that the amount we could realize from that would be fairly minor and somewhat disruptive. We are putting plans in place for implementing those 10 unpaid days through the next year in an effort to minimize disruption to services to our citizens. One of the difficulties about implementing furlough days is understanding that you're asking state employees to do that and absent themselves from work at a time when many of our state agencies are seeing demands on their services unlike anything they've seen in the past decade. So it's a difficult situation for us to continue to navigate, requiring a lot of shared sacrifices by many of our state employees.
But just so make sure I'm clear, Zach Director just said there were concerns going through April. I just want to know, was there ever any indication given to House leadership that you might not want to increase your revenue estimates because we're not seeing numbers? The actual what's actually coming in is not supporting that right now, and you might want to hold off.
Well, the revenue forecasting process is something that we have two different departments within state government that do revenue forecasts. The Legislative Service Commission has its own significant budget staff that does revenue forecasting, and I think the House moved forward with estimates that they felt comfortable with.
I think there might be criticism of this following Jim's question that this announcement was held today after the House passed the budget, because now the budget's in the Republican-controlled Senate.
I think what we've laid out here is that the reality is it is just the timing of the April 15th income tax filing season. We don't know the answer till April 30th, the last day on which we collect revenue, and I think Commissioner Levin has been pretty clear about that.
Since you have a $600 million deficit for this year, and you're going to use that much probably out of the rainy day fund, which you had already planned on spending in the next biennium, is it safe then to assume that the budget moving forward for the next biennium is at least $1.2 billion short at this point? Because your baseline drops, and then your planned spending also drops.
I think he's had.
He's asking me to do math in front of a microphone. That's always dangerous. Right.
Go back to your previous answer about we're going to reforecast.
There you go, there you go. Rich is going to answer your question, Kev, for me, because he's not in front of the mic.
I mean, to the extent that rainy day funds are used in fiscal '09, if that's a decision that's ultimately made by the legislature and governor, then those are funds that obviously aren't available in 10 and 11 or were planned on. So, you know, choose your own number. If it turns out to be 600 that's used, then it's true you'd be 600 short in 10 and 11 from the appropriations that are currently in the budget for 10 and 11. If I understand the second part of you, am I right so far on understanding your question?
Your baseline revenue estimates are dropping $600 million.
Right, yeah, your second point is that if we collected $600 million less in '09, what does that mean for what we collect in 10? And the answer is it depends on the growth of the economy. And so we have not reforecasted the growth of the economy and the growth of revenues for 10 and 11, and we won't do that until conference committee. So we don't really know the answer to that part of your question yet.
But with that in mind, though, it doesn't take a CPA to understand that unemployment continues to go up. Certainly your income taxes are going to drop as well. And from last year to this year, 39% difference.